you. No need to clap. You can clap afterwards if I do a decent job, and if not, that's fine. I don't mind. So thank you for letting me come today. A couple things Maureen did not say about me is, first of all, I'm passionate about health and wellness and serving the local communities. I am a resident of Springboro, so I love to go everywhere, but especially love to go here. So I'm happy to talk to people that live and work and play in the same areas that I do. I am, by background, a licensed physical therapist and a health and wellness coach. I always go to presentations and like to kind of know what people have as their training. I think it kind of helps you know what you're hearing. And the things that I'm presenting are based on research and things that I've done with putting together, not that I've done, but I've dug into, so that you guys can have, hopefully, facts today that will help you age well. And then most importantly, I'm a living, breathing example of aging. I'm not sure how well I'm aging yet. That's to be determined. As you all know, we find that out as we go along, right? So that's what we do. We take one day at a time, and I'm hoping that I can help you make some of your days better by sitting here and listening to this presentation. So as we start, also, any questions, feel free to interrupt me as we go. If I'm talking too fast, I am a fast talker. I try to slow down, but I'm excited to be here, so let me know. Any guesses on what the average lifespan is in the United States right now?
92.
Not quite.
74.
Very close.
79.
You're right on it. I don't think anyone's probably going to get closer than her. It's 79.25. So if you're 79, those 0.25 matter to you a lot, I'm sure. And hopefully you'll go for 80.
I'm 79. Could you talk fast?
You got 0.25 left, plenty of time. No wonder you're the one leaving early, right? Your time is precious. So we all know that our population as a whole across the world is getting older, and our average lifespan in the US is 79.25. But importantly, it's projected by 2050 to be up to 83 years. So we're trending up, we're going to keep trending up, and for some of us that might not seem long enough. For other of us, we may think we can't imagine that 83-year-old mark. But right now, the country in the world, according to the UN stats, with the longest lifespan is Monaco, and that's currently at 87 years. So we have room to improve here in America, and hopefully that's what we'll do based on some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So let me tell you what we're going to go over so you know where we're heading. Our quick agenda is, first, we're going to just sit for a little bit and talk about what is normal aging. Then we're going to spend the next number of moments going through a few of our systems that affect us a lot as we age and that are important systems to our body. So we're going to talk about the cardiovascular system, the musculoskeletal system, the digestive system, the urinary system, and then we're going to dig in a little bit to brain and cognitive health. And then we're going to end by thinking of some tips that we can help us to age better and how we can embrace transitions, because as you age, there are a lot of things that begin to change in your life, and so we want to prepare for those and try to embrace them, and if we do that more positively, it will help us to age well. So that's where we're heading. To get started, I thought we'd just talk about a few fears and myths that are often associated with aging. So if you want to interact and raise your hands, fine. If not, no judgment. But overall, when you look at aging research and to talk to older adults, usually the number one fear is losing independence. So I think most of us can feel that way. We want to age well so we don't lose our independence. And deteriorating health is part of that, right? If our health deteriorates and we're not able to take care of ourselves, then that's those two fears kind of go hand in hand. Loneliness is another thing that we may fear. As we get older, we lose a lot of people we care about, and if we have children, they get up and get their own lives and get busier, and our friends may not be in as good of health as us, so it might be more difficult to connect with them. So we can have that fear of becoming lonelier as we age. And then many of us fear death of others, and our own death. So some myths. I hope none of you have bought into this. I hope you're more the wise owl on the screen and you don't buy into these myths, but common things that you might hear about or have heard about when you were growing up, or maybe even thought about, dare we say, about our own grandparents or things when we were younger, that depression and loneliness are normal parts of aging. That's not true. Those are not normal. They can come with aging, but they're not a normal part of aging. Older adults need less sleep, also not true. All adults repair their bodies, especially their immune systems, as they sleep, so we need those hours to stay healthy. Older adults can't learn new things. Certainly not true, and why would you be here if you couldn't learn new things? You might as well stay at home on the couch and just have a little bit of wine or something. So definitely you can learn new things, and I'm glad you're here. Dementia is a normal part of aging, so that is not true. Dementia risk increase, especially with advanced age, but it's not considered normal aging. And as you know, there are many people that go through their whole life without developing dementia. And then last, but most definitely not least, older adults should take it easy. So a lot of times, maybe you grew up, you thought, and hopefully you were respectful for the people that are older than you and to, help them out, and that's a good thing to do. But as you get older, you don't have to take it easy. If you choose to take it easy, that's fine. It's your prerogative, right? You have choices and not as many responsibilities for certain things, perhaps, but it's not something that you have to do, and it's not something that you want to do as far as taking it too easy to not be interacting and getting activities and things like that. So now that we've talked about what we're doing today and gotten rid of some of the myths and trying to think about our fears, we're going to dig into really what is normal aging. So it's important as we get older to learn what we can expect and what might be typical of things as we go through each decade in life, and not let ourselves think or get that mixed up with what might be disease or illness. So we want to be able to know the facts, that way we have that delineation. That's important for our health and wellness, because if something is typical and expected, we know, okay, I'm 70-some now, that's not something that's not normal. I shouldn't think about myself as I was when I was 40 in this particular area. That comparison isn't good. However, I'm 70-some, but I'm having all these conditions that don't seem to be typical aging. So I need to go and see the doctor and start to get some information and see what I can do to navigate that. So we want to make sure we always know those differences. And then as we go through our life, we often think about health span, and that's true at any point in our life. So we don't want to confuse lifespan with health span. Health span is a term that is used for any age, just living your life the healthiest that you can be and when your life is in good health. So there might be someone that might be young that might have either inherited or had some accidents and have a lot of challenges and their health isn't the place that they want it to be, and then someone that's older might be having still a great health span. So those two words, if you read things about aging and health, you'll see both of those. Then we want to talk about aging as what is the normal process. So there's a term you'll often see, aging, it's called the senescence, and it's basically talking about our cells. So the cells are what makes up all the different parts of our bodies. So our heart has its cells, our muscles has its cells, and these cells come together and form tissues and organs and systems that make things work. And when we start, as we go through life, it's normal that these cells change, and when we get older, there's a process where these cells kind of start to slow down and change in how they do things. So really, biologically, aging is a part of where these cells aren't replicating like they used to. They're not dividing like they used to. However, they're still alive. They're not wanting to die off. So normally, when we're younger, cells that aren't doing what they're supposed to do die off, and we clear them away and get rid of them. They don't cause any problems. As we get older, that process doesn't happen the same way, and so these cells are alive but not in the right state of what they should be doing, and they're still trying to send molecules and information to the rest of our body and our other cells. So that's where things can start varying from normal and where our balance is not staying in place from a biological standpoint. So overall, what happens then is our body is not going to be able to grow new things as well. It's not going to be able to adapt to stress and things that happen to us as well. And we're not going to be functioning at that bigger level, at the tissue and system and organ and all that as well. So over time, things aren't like they used to be. We all know that. And basically, we just want to make sure that we are aware of kind of what some of those normal changes in our cells and tissues are. As far as actual theories of aging, you could dig in and do a lot of things with that. There's no one given, proven, definite theory of aging, but it just goes back to the fact that they think that the changes in hormones, some things that are pre-programmed biologically with our genetics at certain ages and phases happen, and all of the free radicals and different things that we have that can kind of damage our cells over a certain period of time. Those are kind of some of the bigger theories that roll into this process of why these cells are not dividing and replicating and doing and dying off and getting cleared away like they should. It's going to get more interesting, I promise. All right? Everybody doing okay? Any questions? Okay. So this graphic just kind of goes a little bit into what I talked about on the last slide. So I won't spend tons of time here, but basically I like to kind of say something sometimes and then show it a little bit more visually. So what we know is just aging is cumulative, progressive, but normal over time, where we have cells that stop dividing, replicating, and working properly, and these continue to secrete substances and chemicals and molecules that affect our body as a whole, and they're not functioning the same way that they used to when we were younger. So what are some factors that affect our rate of aging? So how fast all of this happens is what we're going to kind of look at now. So I categorize these into several different categories. So the first one is what just in general kind of changes our rate for aging, the rate of these cells and these things happening. So stresses and our responses to stress over life. So everyone lives a different story. Some of us are lucky in life, and we have maybe only a few handful stressful events that are significant, and we manage that pretty well. We have either learned good strategies from our parents, or we've done the work on our own, so our bodies don't that doesn't take a big toll on our bodies. Others of us have lots of chronic illnesses over the years, may have traumatic accidents or other things that come up, maybe loss of jobs, and we have a lot more things that happen to us from these points and significant events. Our immune system. So in general, how well we're doing with our immune system. So are we people that sleep well, eat well, build up those immune cells over the course of our life? Are we a person that's worked hard in the factory for years, had to do swing shift, didn't have the proper REM sleep? You know, all of these things that can contribute to our rate of aging. The cellular senescence is, again, that when the cells just die off. So how that happens is still a little bit uncertain as far as from one person to the next, but what rate that's happening in your body is obviously going to affect your aging, stresses that you have, and your genetics. So your genetics and epigenetics are just kind of the role of how your genetics play based on kind of your lifestyle and what you're exposed to over the years. So all those are some general factors that are going to change the rate of aging, so either speed them up or slow them down. And then under the physical category, so activity. If we stay active, then that's going to slow down our rate of aging. That's one of the main factors that can help us. Our dietary choices, so eating healthy diet, we'll talk about that a little bit, can help us slow down the rate of aging. On the contrary, eating a lot of the wrong foods can accelerate certain parts of our aging. And then sleep. I mentioned sleep is very important for our regeneration and our immune cells especially. So again, having less sleep or not sleeping properly over years can accelerate our rate of aging. From a mental standpoint, stress and how we deal with those stresses. Socialization. So it is shown by research that if we stay more socially connected, we have healthier life and can live longer in that health span. So that's important. And then our mood and mental mindset. So if we're looking at things negative or if we're looking at things positive, that actually affects our health and wellness and our longevity and our health span as well. So we want to try to stay positive when we can, be realistic, but think of hope and positive outcomes. And then not unexpected substance use or specifically substance misuse. So if you're smoking or drinking a lot of extra alcohol, then those are going to speed up your rate of aging. So there's just some different categories of things, how they are related to your aging. So epigenetics is related to genetics in the fact that basically when you think of genetics, those are your actual genes, your DNA, all the things that you inherit from your parents, and those are set from your birth. And then epigenetics is a term used for something that helps to influence those. So if you, say, have a gene that might cause overweight or obesity, but you eat better foods and you're doing lifestyle things, then that is going to change the way that gene maybe expresses itself. And it's not going to contribute to obesity as much in you. That's a simple explanation there. So lots of things can be a play in that. General signs associated with aging before we start digging into some of our systems. So who would have guessed this first one? It's almost not worth putting on there. I think we all know that as we get older, we have changes externally, right? Outwardly, wrinkles, age spots, hair turns gray. And who knew the change in texture of your hair too? So that's crazy. It's gray, but then it's also gets, I've noticed mine's getting wiry. And then things at the tissue level. So we don't store fluid as well as we get older in our tissues, and that's going to change a lot of things, but it's one of the reasons we don't have as good of flexibility in our muscles. It's also why we are starting to have those discs, which are the things that go in between our actual spines. Most of you guys probably have heard somebody has a slip disc, herniated disc, where they have their pain in their leg or something. So those change in consistency, and that's one of the parts of why we're losing our height. Not the whole part, but part of it. And then also we have changes in our nerve system. So it's going to take a little longer for our nerves to send signals, and we will process things a little slower. We'll talk more about that in the brain part. Decline in some of our sensory organs. A lot of us, when I look out here, myself included, I think I told you at the first slide, I'm aging too, right? We're all aging, have glasses. So we have changes in our vision as we get older, changing in hearing. That's one of the downfalls. I have a high-pitched voice, so it's harder for a lot of older people to hear that pitch. So there's lots of changes that normally happen as we age in our sensory organs. And then posture. We have changes in our postural. So we tend to come forward a little bit. When we're walking, we usually slow our walking down just a slight bit. We might take a little shorter strides, things like that. But all these changes are just kind of general changes that are pretty gradual in nature. Sometimes we don't even notice them coming on, and we may all of a sudden see a picture of ourselves, or we may have like a little near fall or stumble, and we think, wow, I can't believe I almost fell there, things like that. So these are just general signs that are associated with aging, and I think that most of us know a lot of these, but we're just kind of covering those first because they make sense a little bit as we dig into each of the systems. There's themes that go along with all of these. So now we are going to start talking about our systems. So the first one is the heart and the blood vessels. So that's what this cardiovascular system is, and I think most of us know a lot about that. Hopefully everyone sitting here has had probably some heart checkup at some point, gone to see their doctor, either had stress tests or maybe had their heart listened to, things like that. You feel your heart, if you've ever gotten really nervous in your life, starting to beat fast, things like that. So you're aware of the system and how it functions normally. So as we age, there are typical changes that occur in our heart and in our blood vessels. So what happens is some of these tissues that are changing are going to make our arteries, which are the blood vessels that carry the blood out of the heart into our body at all the different levels, every different place, it's going to make them stiffer. So we are not going to have the flexibility that we normally had in our artery walls. So when something's not as flexible and you think there's fluid trying to go through it, just like if you know fluid dynamics from pipes and things like that, it's going to be harder for that fluid to go through. So our blood pressure is usually going to be higher as we get older. And a lot of you may have wonderful blood pressure your whole life because you've taken good care of yourself. And then all of a sudden, in your later years, you're like, what? My blood pressure's high? I haven't done anything wrong. You're right. You've just lived well, and you've reached the age where you've maybe had your blood pressure go up because your arteries are now getting stiffer. So the good news is you haven't had that all your life, like a lot of people. So that's a common thing that happens. Our heart's going to work harder to push the blood through. Our resting heart rate, which is how much our heart's beating when we're just sitting here listening to someone talk, is going to stay about the same. But our heart is not going to be able to get at a high level as it did when we were younger. So our max, or what's considered a maximal heart rate, is not going to be as high as it was when we were younger. And so that's important because that affects how much your max capacity is for endurance and for exercise. So alongside of that, when we are having all that blood delivered to like our muscles and our tissues, our tissues aren't as good as taking the oxygen out. That's what we use for energy. So really those two things combined, the heart rate change and the lack of being able to take your oxygen and use it quite as good as you did when you were younger, are what changes happen as you age as far as your endurance capacity. And so really that happens throughout our lifespan, and really about 10% per decade once we kind of go into adulthood that those start to decline. And one of the best things you can do is try to keep yourself active, and that will help your energy and help you from losing more. But either so, typically, again, it's about 10% a decade that happens, and it gets a little higher as you get a little older in that way. So there are changes. So these are typical. And again, so this is really kind of a good example, though, of what might be typical and what might be atypical. And then, we have these typical changes, but it's always important to see your doctor to find out if there's anything that is going on in any other symptoms. But the problem with heart attacks is anybody can have one without any symptoms and anything leading up to it. That's just the reality still. That's why so many people, and especially women, are still dying from heart attacks, or getting into the emergency room and having a heart attack without them even sometimes realizing it is a heart attack that brought them there. The symptoms can be different for women than men. I will say there's more people that are being aware of that now, and that's, I think, changing. So hopefully that'll continue to improve. So any other questions about this?
What would you explain a heart murmur?
So a heart murmur is usually related to one of your heart valves not closing the normal way, a change in the closing of that. And sometimes if it's not closing properly, then you get a blood swish through there. And so that's what the doctors and what they're hearing is.
So it's not consistent? It's periodically?
Most heart murmurs can be with each contraction of the heart, because there's a way that all the valves close. But again, that would be something to discuss with your doctor. If he or she's the one that has said you had a heart murmur. And I do know, from doctor to doctor, sometimes, you might think you have something, and then the next time you go to another exam, you might not hear it. So that's something I would bring up with your medical provider. But that's what a heart murmur usually is. It's just that sound of that blood not being sealed off properly, because the valves work to seal the blood when they pump from chamber to chamber, and if it's not sealing, it kind of leaks a little bit. So that's a great lead into our musculoskeletal system. So our bones, joints, muscles, tendons, ligaments, that's all the things that make up our musculoskeletal system. And again, as we age, there are typical changes that occur there. All of us notice we're not as strong as we used to be. Well, we do have a decrease throughout our lifespan after the age of about 30 to 35 of muscle power and performance around 10 to 15% per decade. So, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, each decade is changing. After we get to about 65 for women and 70 for men, it starts to accelerate a little bit higher than that, up to 25% or more. So it's really important that we think about our strength and how much muscle mass we can keep on us when we're younger, and continue that each decade, so that it is going to be more difficult to build as we get older, so we want to be at a good starting point. And that's never too late to start. Even in your 80s and 90s, you can still physically gain muscle strength, and that's important to remember. So if you feel yourself starting to struggle getting up from a chair or doing other things, get started on some exercises so you can try to work on that. So basically what that is about is basically we're not making protein quite as well as we did before and repairing our muscles. So our muscles are made up mostly of protein. You probably, bodybuilders that eat protein or amino acids, things like that. So also change in hormonal levels. We all have changes in our testosterone and estrogen as we age, depending on male, female, but those are going to change our muscle mass. And then dietary factors. We also sometimes don't eat as much protein as we get older. We might not get outside and get our vitamin D, different things that kind of change as we get older with our eating styles that can increase our risk for losing muscle mass. As far as the bones go, they are going to shrink some in our size and density, and they're going to become more susceptible to fractures as we get older. Again, this is related to some hormone changes. We actually start, as we get older, depositing some fat outside of our bone marrow, so that's changing the actual structure. And if we become inactive and we're not loading our bones, that contributes to even more. Throughout our life, bones are constantly modeling and changing. So we're taking bone away, we're building bone back up. And when you're a youth, you know that you always hear about kids, oh, have they grown to full height, or is their growth plates closed, all that. So our bones are active and dynamic. We always think about the bones when we look at them as a skeletal, like that's fixed, but really things are always being reabsorbed and put back in our bones. So it's always important to have exercise, proper diet, especially strength or weight-bearing exercises to keep our bones healthy. So the good news is the things that you do good for your bones are going to be good for your muscles and vice versa. And if you really take heart and develop some habits early on, it will help you throughout your lifetime. With strength, it really only takes a couple times a week of challenging your muscles to build strength, 2 to 3 times. So there's lots of things, lots of programs. I'm going to show some different QR codes later, but there's lots of resources online that you can look at if you don't have any ideas on how to do that. Lots of programs around the area that have exercises for older adults too that are good to participate in. And even just getting out and walking is great for especially the lower body to keep your building your muscles and your bone mass. Any questions about muscles or bones as we get older? I didn't dive a lot into the osteoporosis and the specifics of bone health because I do believe that's one of the upcoming topics. If I remembered, when I planned this presentation, I did look at the premier topics for the rest of the year, and that way I didn't go too far into the ones that are coming up that are going to be a lot deeper. Okay, so digestive system. So this is everything from an oral cavity to when food exits. And basically throughout the system, there's all kinds of functions that are affected. So we talked a lot about how we're not storing fluid as well. We're going to have some changes in our saliva as we get older. In our oral cavity, we might have some changes in our dental structure too that might make it difficult to chew different types of foods. So a lot of you have awareness of that. Our esophagus, which is the part that comes from our mouth down, takes the food to our stomach, slows down a little bit, so we might not swallow quite as well or quite as quickly. When we get to our stomach, we have those gut microbes, probably you've heard of, or those are the different types of bacteria and things in our gut. And stomach has a few of them too, so they're not the same. And then we might have less blood flow to our stomach and less of that mucus and fluid in our stomach too to protect our stomach wall. So that's really what all this fluid does, is protects the inside layers of our intestines. Very few changes in the small intestines, but when you get to the large intestines or colon, there are a lot more changes when you get older. And this is something that most of us are aware of as well. So just the transient time for food to move through our colon changes. We are not going to have the same gut microbes in there as we get older. They change, and that can be an issue with our immune system because that's really what those microbes do, help our immune system and help protect us from things coming in through our gut. You've probably heard of leaky gut and how that's related to inflammation and a lot of diseases. So as we get older, we can become more exposed and we can have more risk for that. And then this enteric nervous system is just, we actually have a nervous system within our gut. So it's kind of called the second brain. And that's a whole nother discussion as well, because there's a lot of research going into that. But there are changes there too. So just like our brain is making changes and not processing quite as fast with some of the nerves, the same thing happens kind of in our gut. So things aren't getting communicated as well from the gut to the brain and vice versa. So things kind of slow down, don't always work quite as well as they used to. But the big thing is here, we want to just make sure we're continuing to have healthy dietary patterns to support our digestive system. So the best things that you can do for your digestive system are to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, things that have a lot of high fiber, which again, most of you are probably aware of that, but as Americans, we still don't really eat as much fiber as we should. So keep working on that. That will help a lot. Drink also plenty of water because it's about fluid, but it's also about water. And like I said, we're not holding as much fluid as we get older, so we still need to be every day consuming water and fluids regularly. Now we're going to go into the aging of your urinary system, and this one I'm covering just kind of quickly. This is one you are going to have a topic on pelvic health coming up, and I'm sure that presenter will be covering a lot of this with the pelvic health discussion. So I think that if you have any interest and or issues, that is one that you must see or must download from the website once it gets posted, because I think that'll be a great discussion for you guys. But in general, some changes that are happening, our bladder, like all of our other tissues, is becoming less elastic. So just kind of like our arteries were, our muscles aren't as elastic. We have all these changes in things that are happening that aren't giving our body tissues as much of a stretch as they used to. And so that starts to weaken things, because a lot of times when you have a stretch, then you lead to a rebound, and that's how you can contract and get better flow of things. So we're going to also have weakening of our muscles in our pelvic floor, a larger prostate for men, and then this leads us to having lots of different urinary tract symptoms. So it can be incontinence, it could be overactive bladder, it could be like residual not voiding all the way, and lots of other things that can come along with that. And as far as interventions, there are some behavioral interventions you can do, making sure you're timing drinking your water, for instance, and especially if you're having trouble later in the day, getting up a lot, try to make sure you're drinking enough earlier in the day so you're not spending your whole night up, but you need to make sure you get your water in. You can time your voiding if you're having issues with urinary incontinence, trying to go to the restroom every couple hours so you're not waiting to the last minute, things like that. Pelvic floor training is a great way to strengthen the pelvic floor. Again, you'll have a great presentation about that coming up. And then, of course, there's medications and surgical options. Again, talking to your doctor if you're starting to have signs of this, and talking to your doctor early on. So that's another thing that sometimes we can all think about, is that maybe we don't bring up the little things to our doctor because we feel like we only have this long in our appointment and it's not something that we should bother them with. But if we bring up the little things early on, then one, it can help them give a heads up. And even if they do that, do not necessarily do anything about it that time, when they hear that again the next time or the next time, and a couple years later they're like, oh yeah, you've been talking about it for a couple years now. It seems like it's gotten to the point where it's starting to, become more of a problem. We definitely need to get you in to see something, versus maybe if it's the first time you've mentioned it, you're not sure how long it's been going on, you might forget, things like that. So make sure you tell your doctor everything when you go into your visits so that they can get a comprehensive view of how things are going for you. Any questions there before we move on to brain and cognition? Okay, you're doing okay, good. All right, so we talked about the myth. There's no one saying we can't learn new things. We talked about the myth that dementia is a normal part of aging. It's not. So how do we differentiate what are normal changes in the brain? So our brain is changing all throughout lifespan, right? When you're a kid, your brain is still growing. You've probably heard more and more now. When you were younger, you may or may not have known the brain doesn't fully develop when you're a teenager. You have to wait till you're in your 20s now, and that's a big thing that's come out with driving, impulsivity, and kids for drinking or other addictive type behaviors. That's just, they're more at risk for that until that brain fully develops. But throughout our lifespan, our brain is rewiring and changing what we know, what we learn, what we remember. And so it's a dynamic process. And same is true as we get older. So this is nothing new. We often start thinking about it when we get older, but it's just a different type of change. But our brain does shrink a little bit in certain areas. So the hippocampus is one area where it shrinks. That's the area that does a lot of learning and memory. So again, that's a little different change. And then we have this stuff called myelin sheaths, which is basically just a covering that goes around our nerves in the brain, and it helps them to transmit things faster. So it's kind of, think of it as an insulator, if you know, like electricity and things like that. And since it starts to wear down, we might have a little bit slower processing in the brain as we get older. One of the things that actually improves in our brain and changes is a positive thing is our brain starts to branch out our dendrites even more. So what these are our nerve cells, that the starting part of our nerve cells that reach into different areas of our brain to get information. So where you were younger, you might have only had those reach into a certain part of your brain. As you get older, they reach into more and more parts of your brain. And so this is what a lot of times people think about of gaining wisdom as you get older, which is a positive thing, because you have more inputs and experiences that you can draw from and make conclusions on. So this picture I put on purpose, it's kind of like they say, when you're younger, you can only see the tree, but when you're older, you can see the forest. You can take the big picture in life. So it's neurologically part of how things are changing. So again, all the changes aren't negative. There's some positive things that are occurring. So when we think about normal aging and typical things that occur, and we worry, maybe that fear of dementia coming on. Lots of times we can think about, how do we know? So some things that are interesting to think about is just looking at the typical things. So let's say typically we might have a little slower processing. So that means we might not be able to handle multitasking, or if we're distracted more, we may need to focus. So that might be a typical thing. We also may once in a while forget things, right? I mean, I forget things, everyone forgets things, and as we get older, we might think, oh, we're forgetting things, we worry about it might be dementia. Well, forgetting things on occasion is normal and definitely a normal part of aging. So sometimes you kind of have to think about, what are you forgetting? You know, are you forgetting your car keys when you walk outside and you have to go back in to get them? Or are you forgetting the name of your daughter that you've known your whole life and gave birth to? Things like that. So that's the difference, how you can kind of look at things there between typical and what would be dementia. And then oftentimes you might struggle for words, and people can kind of confuse that too, like, oh, I might be getting dementia, I can't think of one to say. Well, you might not think of the word right away, but when you think of it, you can see it, but you can't think of it. But when you say it, it's the right thing. And dementia, signs of that would be more naming something that's completely odd. So you might be wanting to say like plate, but you would say stove. So those are things that you can think about as far as differentiating. And when they do the talk on brain health, I think they're going to dig into that a lot more, and you'll get some really good information on that. And I'm not sure what month that is, but I know it's coming up. So don't stress every time you forget something, is what I'm trying to say from this slide. It's normal. But if you do see signs in yourself or a loved one that seem atypical, it is important to get that and check in with your doctor and a provider there so you can see what you can do. Lots of things that you can do to maintain your brain health. We'll talk about that a little bit, but again, more in that presentation that's coming up. But one of the things is just thinking of anything you can do for a mind-body connection. So activities like yoga or Tai Chi, even taking like a walk and just trying to like incorporate nature or think of things when you're walking. So you're engaging a couple different things at once are all great things that you can do. And then games and other things like that are important. So let's go on to some tips for aging well. So I kind of put them into 3 categories. So one of the things that's going to help you age well is maintaining your physical health. It's a very important part of your health. Physical, mental health are important. So maintain your physical health, and then obviously the mental health part, keeping your mind engaged. So we can still learn new things. We've established that, and we want to make sure we're doing that. And then lastly, establishing goals and dreams. So as you transition into later phases of life, you know, a lot of times earlier phases, you have specific things that you're working on, goals, dreams that you're doing, and then we don't think about that for the later years, but that's still important. So physical health, we're going to go through these fairly quickly because a lot of you probably know these, but activity. We cannot sit and stay healthy for long. We want to get up, we want to get moving. It doesn't have to be, you know, overzealous, just general movement. And a study was done in adults over 40, and people who took 8,000 steps per day, which is around 4 miles, compared to those who took 4,000 per day, had a 50% lower risk of death from all causes. It doesn't matter what, cancer, heart disease, etc. So the benefits of activity, it's going to help us maintain our weight. We want to stay at a healthy weight. Being too overweight and being too underweight as we get older is both a risk for our health and wellness and longevity. And then anything that we can do activity is going to help us with our muscle function. So that's going to be the one that kind of pumps up that muscles better and helps with that musculoskeletal system. And in general, how much mass you have in your muscles is a better predictor of how long you're going to live than your actual weight or what's called your body mass index. So even if you're a good weight, but it's more fat weight or not very muscular, it's not going to be as helpful as if some of that's lean muscle tissue. Lean muscle tissue is going to help you perform better. So having trouble getting motivated? Anybody? So it's hard for everyone to get motivated. I love to exercise, and I always have a few times a year where I get in laws and feel like I'm not motivated. And I like doing it. And so if you don't like doing it, it makes it even more difficult. But this is the National Institute of Aging on the NIH, which is National Institute of Health. I encourage you, if you're a person who likes to go get more information and do your research and dig into some general things, they have lots and lots of handouts there, tip sheets that are easy to find and give you just step, tip to do this, tip to get better at exercising, tip for healthy bones, etc. So I know your handouts are small, but I did put the QR codes, and that's where you just take the picture and tap on it, and it takes you directly to the website, but I also wrote the websites out. If you guys can't see these things or need any more resources, when you leave here, you can reach out to myself or to Maureen. I can have them write a little email thing, whatever, but I would be glad to send them to you if you can't see them on your handout. I don't want anyone to, it's a lot, so I didn't want to, thousands of papers, but find something enjoyable and simple. If it's complex and you don't like it, you're not going to do it, and stick with it. It doesn't have to be complex. So fit it into your daily routine. So the easiest way to establish a new habit is to stack it on another habit. So at some point in your life, you kind of probably learn to get up in the morning, wash your face, brush your teeth, get dressed. Then perhaps, maybe when you got older, your mom said, well, you better start flossing your teeth. So you had to get up, you had to wash your face, brush your teeth, floss your teeth, get dressed. So the same is true for this. Now maybe you need to do some stretches. So you probably need to get up, get dressed, brush your teeth, floss your teeth, sit down, do a stretch for your back, stretch your hips, that kind of thing. So find a place in your daily routine where you can add and stack that into your habit. Slowly start, build up. You don't want to do anything too ambitious too quickly. You don't want to get hurt, because injuries will definitely take you off of your motivation. And then just keeping track too. Make yourself a little calendar. Say, sometimes we can beat ourselves up because we feel like we have to do everything and then we don't do anything. But maybe you can just say, look, all this week I've done 10 minutes of activity. I walked outside and looked at my flowers 5 minutes on Tuesday. On Thursday, I walked past the mailbox, down the street and back before I got my mail, little things like that. So nutrition, also very important. Diet in America is the #1 cause, poor diet, of all of our main diseases that cost us the most and have us the highest risk for disability and death. So heart disease, diabetes, all related back to diet. So we want to make sure we're eating healthy. So studies on aging always come back to main dietary patterns for healthier aging. Eating lots of fruits and vegetables, eating a lot of whole grains, which are grains that have still a lot of fiber in them, so like your whole wheat or your oatmeal, things like that, rather than processed white bread, etc., and pastas. Having less fat and sodium, so we want to watch those processed foods and the highly salty foods, and then limiting your sugar. So this has several different diets on here. You can look them up if you want, but basically the My Plate is the CDC recommendations, and you can find them online. And then there's 3 other ones that are pretty well researched: the Mediterranean diet, the DASH diet, which is for high blood pressure control, and then the Mind diet, which is a diet that's focused more on brain health. And the Mind diet is a combination of Mediterranean and DASH, but just focused on like some berries and really emphasizing the green vegetables to to decrease your risk for Alzheimer's. And then as you get older, the main tips for healthy eating are to make sure you're having nutrient-dense foods. So if you're not going to eat a lot of something, if you're the kind of person that just picks in pieces during the day, make sure what you're eating has a lot of nutrients in it, because you don't want to be vitamin deficient. So make sure you're also getting plenty of protein, and protein is one thing that's recommended that you should have at each meal. So if you're only having some protein at night, then you've gone most of the day without being able to repair and build. All right, so then making sure you're drinking enough, we talked about that. With the senses, spicing things up. So feel free, instead of using a lot of extra salt, to use other spices. So our brain kind of has these patterns that we remember. So if you're a sugar person and you need to cut down your sugars, try some cinnamon. That will make we automatically kind of taste sweeter if it has cinnamon in it. And then try other spices as well to just stimulate, make the food taste better. We're going to keep moving because I know that we start a little late, but I don't want to keep you guys over too much. So physical helps sleep. So recommendations for older adults, 7 to 9 hours. And less than 6 hours is when things start changing as far as getting risk of losing cognitive skills or increasing your risk for dementia and depression, and then even increased risk for dying. Again, we talked about that immune system at the beginning. So sleep is really when our body regenerates and restores our body. We want to make sure we're doing that. If we do get adequate sleep, the good news is then it decreases our risk for diabetes and heart disease and decreases our risk for being overweight. So one of the things that people don't think about with sleep is when you get a good night's sleep, you make better decisions the next day. So you're eating better, you're able to have more energy to exercise and do the things that you would normally do. And then also just getting adequate sleep helps us function at our best and helps us be more creative with our thinking because we can engage all areas of our brain, they're well rested. So as we age, we definitely have changes with our sleep. We have earlier bed and wake up times. This is a joke. I know my husband used to tease my in-laws all the time about having dinner at 4, but there's a reason everything does shift a little bit naturally with our circadian rhythms. We also often wake up a little bit more during the night. We're not getting into that deepest sleep quite as easily, so we'll wake up more by light or noise or other distractions. Of course, medications and medical conditions can interfere with our sleep, as can things like restless leg syndrome, insomnia, and sleep apnea. So if you're having difficulty sleeping, talk to your doctor. It really is an important component of our health. Sometimes we just think, that everyone does this. Well, it's still very important to get that addressed. And there are things that you can do. Here's another one of those tip sheet QR codes that links to that on tips for sleeping better from the National Institute of Aging. But regular to bed and wake up. So even if they're earlier, just make them regular. We don't want to stay up late and then get up early one day and then get up late next day and go to bed. That's what messes up our circadian rhythm. We want it to be regular. Try not to nap late in the day. That really will interfere with your ability to get to sleep and stay asleep at night. Make sure the room is comfortable and your bed is comfortable. The temperature is important. I know that as we get older, we crank up things, but still, even with older adults, it's better to sleep 70 or under degrees. Try to be mindful or do some kind of calming, reading, relaxing, meditating, anything that calms you down before you go to bed. And again, discuss with your doctor if you're having trouble getting to sleep. General physical health, I always like to plug this when we're out and about, just making sure that you keep up with your routine, doctor's visits, screens, and vaccines. That's a great way to protect you from a lot of the main illnesses you might get as you get older. Watch your substances if you happen to be a user and see what you can do to control those better. Next, keeping your mind engaged. So it's important at any period in our life that we have meaningful and purpose activities. So think of the things that you have that you like and that are important to you and get out and try to do some of those. Or do them from in if you have to do them virtually or some other way, bringing people to you. But trying to be involved in the community is going to help you keeping your mind engaged. And when we interact with other people to have conversations, learn new skills, or go see art, we are engaging more parts of our mind than we do on the day-to-day basis in our normal environment. So socializing, joining groups, playing games, all of those things are going to stimulate other areas, and that's important. And what I love about this is a lot of the things that we look forward to doing when we get older are good for our health. You can really start to enjoy, if you're a person that likes art or music, you can have more time to go to shows, listen to things, volunteer. You can read, write, do the things that you want to do. And if you're single and have a pet, that can be very good for you too, to have a companion at home. So lots of things that you enjoy are going to be good for your health. And then making sure that you're trying to find ways to socialize, because loneliness and social isolation can lead to a higher risk of heart disease, cognitive decline, and even depression. So there is a difference between loneliness, though, and isolation. Loneliness is that perception of feeling alone, and isolation is being isolated or physically apart from other people. So some people can't help being, isolated from where they live, and if they can't drive, things like that. But both want to strive to make more social contacts, however you can do that. Ideally in person, but if not, virtually, or phone calls, things like that. We talked earlier about stress and just making sure that we learn to control our reactions and try to be able to stabilize our emotions. We're always going to go through emotional periods, but we want to make sure we're processing those and becoming stable so that we're not letting hormones like cortisol that raise when we are under a lot of stress attack our body. And building stress resilience is important over time. This is what's gotten you to where you're at. You've got some grit by now, I'm assuming, and just want to keep that up. So it's not a time to stop thinking about building stress resilience. It's the time to continue. And there's lots of activity ideas here. Meditation is always great, engages your mind, calms you, helps you relieve stress. Activity and doing things that you enjoy, being together with people, laughing. That's a great health benefit when you laugh. You can journal, do the Tai Chi, nature walks we talked about, yoga, anything relaxing. And then last but not least, keeping that positive mindset is really important. So we're wrapping up here with establishing our goals and dreams. So living life with a sense of purpose within your values and setting goals is going to benefit your mental and your physical health. So what you want to do is just think of what is your direction now. You know, just like anything else, if you go on a trip somewhere and you have no idea where you're going, then you're not going to probably necessarily get to that destination. So you want to figure out what might be a direction or two you want to head into in this particular time of your life. What might make you feel like you've accomplished something? Because sometimes we think we don't accomplish things if we're not clear about what we're doing, you know, and we can't look back on our days and they just kind of get away from us. So it also provides us a feeling of control. When we set goals and dreams and we accomplish them, then we feel like we've controlled something and we've navigated something. So it can be good for our mental health and positivity. And importantly, it keeps us engaged in the world. So a lot of times will be out and about and, you know, here. And my aunt's like type of person that sometimes says, oh, you know, the young people these days, they don't have, you know. And I'm like, well, why don't you go out and talk to some of the young people these days? You know, you have all this wisdom, you have all this ability to mentor, you did it through your whole life. Don't stop now, because you're right, then everybody can benefit from each other. So keeping yourself engaged. And last, embracing life transitions. So as we get older, we have a lot of transitions, a lot of them that are positive things. You know, some of us really look forward to retirement, we settle in, we hopefully have some good years. For others, it starts with challenges. We have to maybe retire earlier than we wanted because of health concerns. So we never know how a transition is going to go, but as much as we can, we want to try to prepare for the transitions in our lives and just be realistic about what we fear. So taking a look at that up front will help us be able to process those emotions and make a plan, validate how you're feeling, and then think about how you can practice some self-care throughout these transitions. So a lot of times you get busy and something's coming up, you might be moving and you might not be sleeping well, you might not be eating well, but take a break and think of how you can embrace yourself and take care of yourself during that time. I think what's really hard is to sometimes accept support, but just as you've had a long life that you've lived and helped people throughout it get where they are to be today, they want to help you and other people want to help you be where you're at in your life now. So ask for help and accept support. Draw from your past experiences. That's the thing you have the most of is experience, so use those. And then try to think of how you can appreciate benefits and benefit from the changes. So a lot of times we think about what we don't have or had at one point, but we really want to think about what do we have now and what can we have in the future, and look at that more positively. So I just thank you. I know I talked fast towards the end, but I wanted to make sure I tried to get you, I think it's about an hour from when I started. So I have lots of resources here. And again, if anybody has anything that they have questions on or needs more of from the handout being small, then I would be glad to take your name down or talk to you afterwards. So have a great day, and thanks for coming out. I love this program. Hopefully you keep coming every month. There's a lot of good topics. I have looked at them, I just don't know them all right up here. So
Let's
thank you.
Christi again. Very